Hello, people of the internet. My name is JD Shadow, and because I feel as though this is not getting enough attention, and I feel as though this is something that needs to be discussed immediately, because if we do not get on Sony about this, then it is going to end up becoming a slippery slope before we know it. And if you don't believe me, it has shown itself before. What are we talking about? Well, if you are not in the know about what is going on, Sony seemed to implement a brand new policy. Now, what this basically means is that if you are in Japan and you create a game, it has to go through a certain amount of approvals before you can get it onto the PlayStation console or the PlayStation platform. Now, because there is a brand new policy that has to do with some rather lewdness that goes on in some of the anime novels or the graphic novels of some of the more ecchi stuff in these games or in the Japanese anime type games, they're finding it really hard to comply with Sony's new policy. Now, this is something that is being implemented in the Western market. However, this is not only having to do with localization. If they want to release their game on the PlayStation platform at all, anywhere in the world, they have to conform to this policy for localization, even if they have no intention on localizing it for English audiences. Now, we first heard that something was going on when P-Cube announced they were canceling the Western release of Omega Labyrinth Z. They had, quote, respectfully complied with the wishes of the platform holder and therefore withdrawn any future plans for the game. They had said that they strive to release Japanese content for its fans as close to the source material as possible, and P-Cube worked with all relevant age rating bodies in their respective territories, but it was the platform holder, not the ESRB or anybody of that sort, that had a problem. So it was not going to be released on the PlayStation 4 or PlayStation Vita. Now, this was kind of peculiar because according to them, according to what they said, this was complied with by the ESRB. In other words, the Electronic Software Ratings Board rated the game. So it should have been okay to go with, right? Well, PlayStation had a problem with it. Sony had a problem with it. But that was seemingly the first time we heard that something was going on, but we didn't really know much yet. Then another game came about called Senran Kagura Burst Renewal. Now, this was from Xseed Games, and you probably know who Xseed Games are. If you are familiar with Valhalla Knights or the most recent Wild Arms games, Wild Arms 4 and XF, you probably know who these people are. And they have a pretty big portfolio dating back to 2008. So this is kind of a new thing. This is kind of a new thing where they couldn't get their game to be certified by PlayStation, to be licensed by PlayStation for release on their platforms, unless there was a certain thing that they got removed from this particular game. And that was its quote-unquote intimacy mode. And there was really no information about what that mode is, as I'm getting the information from it from Niche Gamer. However, this seems to be similar to what P-Cube Games had gone through in their ordeal. But unlike P-Cube, Xseed told us something we didn't know. On their Twitter page, Tom Lipschutz in his Twitter responded saying to the question why was the previous game allowed but not this one, and he said this was a brand new policy, which started to blow the lid off on what was going on. Now, of course, this probably wasn't the only two games that were censored before the big one came about, and we'll get to that in just a second, but you were probably starting to see a pattern. This was Sony's new policy, a policy that wasn't implemented until most recently. Now, we wonder why that is, and I'm gonna theorize what's going on in just a moment, because one of the big ones came about just recently, as in today, as of the day I am recording this. According to Push Square, the Sony censorship policy has hit Dead or Alive Xtreme 3 Scarlet. Now, what does this mean? Well, it basically means that Sony is also targeting some of the bigger developers. This is Tecmo Koei we're talking about here. The thought was that it was going to only affect smaller developers. Not so much right now. Now, the biggest thing about this is that the uncensored version, the uncut, the director's cut, or whatever you want to call it, is going to appear on a very interesting platform. A Nintendo platform, the Nintendo Switch, with everything in there. So what are they removing? Well, the gold fan and the softening gel. Now, the gold fan basically blows the character's skirts up and like a Marilyn Monroe type of thing going on, so you can take a picture of what it is that you want to take a picture of once that happens. Of course, the softening gel gives the characters a jiggle effect, and use your imagination what that means. But these are two things that appeared previously in PlayStation version releases of this franchise. If you remember, Dead or Alive Xtreme 3 was not available in the US because of the issues that happened during that time, and I made a special report a long time ago about that. You go back and watch that if you want to. However, this is a little bit interesting because this is when Sony's new policy comes about, and they have to remove them out of all versions of the PlayStation game, both in the US and in Japan. They're not going to let them release it on a Sony platform in any territory unless they remove these two things. Now, why is it interesting that Nintendo is going to have these completely uncut on their platform? Well, if you were not around during the late 80s, early 90s, Nintendo was really well known for censorship in the games that appeared on Nintendo's platform. They were draconian. Anyone could tell you that even though the version of Mortal Kombat on Super Nintendo was graphically and visually and audibly superior to the Sega Genesis version, it was the Sega Genesis version that got the best love because it retained the blood, the fatalities, and everything in between. The full version of the game, if you want to say that. So Nintendo wouldn't be the first place you would think something like that would appear on. But not only is Xtreme 3 going to appear there completely uncensored, but several of these other titles that I've talked about might actually appear on the Switch in their full form without any censorship whatsoever. Hey, they are rated by the ESRB. If they say it's okay on their end, why should any console maker be the judge, jury, executioner in this concept? In that sense, Sony is just shooting themselves in the foot here about what is going on. And there's even more so to be had there. Because Reset Era, and yes, we're going to talk about them because I feel they have a role to play in this, actually had a thread about the Extreme Beach Volleyball thing that appeared in Push Square. Now, surprisingly, this was sort of a balanced thread for the most part, but there was one thing that came up that I believe was what I call moderator bait. And it happens a lot in Reset Era. It happened a lot when these very same mods and these very same administrators almost drove NeoGAF into the ground. They almost buried them because of stuff like this, in which somebody tries to bring up a particular topic that is deemed taboo in order to shut down the conversation that they feel they don't have an answer for. And in this sense, they didn't have an answer for why Sony is censoring these games. So, what's the one thing that is about Japan that you can really nail them for? Well, if you don't remember when I talked about the Sailor Moon Crystal intimacy scene, it is the notion that the age of consent there in Japan is a little bit different than us here in the States. Now, you can argue about the morality of it all you want, but the fact of the matter is that the age of consent in Japan is 14 years, which basically means once you hit 14, it is not statutory rape anymore, at least in Japan. So we in the Western territories seem to have a bit of a different thought process in mind. So you probably know where I'm getting at when we're talking about something like these two games. The notion that the girls in the scenes in question were underage, that it would be statutory rape. that it would be child pornography. That's the argument they went for. Now, yes, there was some balance there because there are some people that wouldn't let them get away with saying that. But at the same time, that is the argument they kept going back to. The ones that were trying to condone this censorship, that's the argument they keep going back to. Never mind that the women in Dead or Alive are of the normal age of consent, which is 18 years of age in the US, and you can argue that they were even older than that. So even in that sense, the issue about Dead or Alive is that the underage argument does not hold true to that particular game. So you can't just blurt out that whole notion as a way to condone what Sony is doing, because you don't even know the age of the girls that were in the other games to begin with. How do they know what's going on there? And yes, this is a slippery slope because of what Sony now, because of the press not saying anything quite yet about this issue or not calling Sony out on this yet, is going to possibly allow Sony to do, which is target even bigger developers, bigger publishers. This is a slippery slope that needs to be addressed now. Yet, yep, we're getting the publishers and the developers being held hostage because the journalistic scene is not doing their damn job. But apparently, Reset Error did its job in taking the, what I call, moderator bait or administrator bait, because Ghost Crew decided to lock the thread concerning this issue about Dead or Alive 3. Why did he do this, or why did she do this, you ask? It is because of, quote, the sexualization of minors is not tolerated here, and discussions like this one invariably end poorly and please no one. We do not believe this thread will be different, and so it has been locked. Good going, Reset Error moderation team, you definitely took the bait there. And it's not the first time you've done that either. Or is it because you did not like how the thread was going, where some people might go against what you see as the approved thought process, and you didn't know how else to legitimately lock the thread before people went against what you believe, and that was the best way to excuse why you had to lock the thread. Because look at the thread. There was no way it would go even close to the sexualization of minors. That was what somebody thought was happening and why they were condoning the Sony censorship, in which other people were arguing that that was not what they were censoring. That was not what was going on. There was no sexualization of minors in these games. That was the argument, that there was no reason to censor these games. That was just Sony being true draconian with this policy, which they are, and it has to be called out because, yes, the thread certainly says stuff about The Witcher 3 and Red Dead Redemption 2, which, by the way, had its own problems with censorship because of a YouTuber who was highlighting killing feminists in the game by various means. And the media, the gaming media, had a field day because apparently there should be a protected status for those particular NPCs in the game. And I don't mean NPC as an insult, because that's starting to happen too. All of a sudden NPC is now an insult. I'm talking about non-playable characters, actual NPCs in actual video games. But every NPC in Red Dead Redemption 2 is essentially fair game. And by the way, you get your morality knocked down a peg when you do stuff like that in the game. But of course, we couldn't be bothered to talk about that. We had condemned somebody from doing what the game allows you to do. And to take that as a way of saying, hey, he wants to do this for real, and the game is going to influence people to do that for real. As if we didn't have this conversation countless times throughout the years that video games do not cause real world violence. It has been proven, scientifically proven, that we choose to ignore that because we are too busy catering to the media. We are too busy catering to these peak conglomerates who, it is their job, it is what they're being paid to do, to demonize the gaming community because they are in direct competition. They own entertainment properties that are in direct competition, that are losing viewers to games, to new media like Voodoo, like Hulu, Netflix, YouTube, you name it, it is there. And you cannot deny that they are getting hit by that. So instead of fighting fairly, they decide to demonize the people who choose to use those mediums, who choose to play video games, who choose to consume things like comic books and stuff like that. So is it any surprise that the gaming media is once again completely silent about this Sony censorship thing? Something that in the past, if this would happen in 2008 or in 1998, we would never hear the end about it in GamePro magazine or EGM. We would never hear the end of it, and we would have a firestorm of them being absolutely pissed off about it, and Sony would have to change their ways. Or, hey, maybe this would be the PS3 debacle all over again. The giant enemy crab, the $6.99 price tag. Anybody remember that and what the media did to Sony back then? They grilled them about that, rightfully so. They thought they were bigger than the game industry, and they got burned deeply for it. Now, did it become too unfair? Yes, it did. They should call people out on it, not to try to make sure that they go down in flames for it, but to say, hey, you need to do better. And unfortunately, the media did go too far on that, and they had to go back on their word the more that Sony improved their status with the PS3. When they did stuff in order to lower the price, and they did stuff in order to make sure that the PS3 at the end of the day was a better console to be able to get and to at least try out. But we have now seen the media be completely silent here, and we don't know why. They have decided that instead of doing what they're supposed to do, which is call out these companies if they are not supporting what the gamers want them to do, they are instead taking the side of these companies and saying the one thing that we don't need them to say, that yes, games do cause real world violence. That is the worst thing you could possibly agree with, and somehow, for some reason, they are now doing a 180, and we are trying to get them to tell us what is going on. And instead of them being truthful, they are demonizing people. They're saying, oh, well, you're misogynistic, you're racist, because you don't support Diablo Immortal. Where did the equation get to that? Why does calling out Blizzard on what seems to be a potential cash-in, a cash grab, is equating to us being neo-Nazis? When did we get from one equating to the other in that scenario? I don't get where they drew the line, how they were able to draw the line from one to the other. Maybe because a few choice people decided they didn't know how to act or how to behave to the whole thing. And so you're taking one or two individuals and applying that to everybody who called this a cash grab and Blizzard didn't know what the hell they were doing. Now you want to demonize the entire group, and we don't know why that is. So when we get to this Sony thing, now you guys are completely silent about what Sony is doing. I don't understand it. We don't understand it. Why the silence? Why the condoning of a hugely unpopular thing? Because you might have a few friends you want to protect within Sony? See, this is all we want is answers, and we're being condemned. We are being demonized because we're just looking for a receipt for the Emperor's new clothes. That's all we're asking is answers for a receipt. And instead, we are being called every single name in the book by the very people that you're supposed to be serving. Why is it that you have taken the side of those people who don't care about gaming? They don't care. Sony might care, but because they want to line the pocketbooks. Same maybe with any developer or publisher. But at the very least, they know what it is they want to give gamers. At least the publishers and developers do. But you have to call this stuff out. If you're not going to call this stuff out, if you're not going to do your job, then why are you doing the job? Why are you there? If you don't like gaming, why are you there? You have to to have some form of passion about video games. You have to have some form of compassion about the things you're actually covering, and stop demonizing us for asking questions. That is how we get to the truth. That is how we get there. If somebody deserves to be called out, then let them be called out. And if they have questions they need to be answered honestly with the truth, then you have to push them until they get to the truth and tell you the truth. Why is it that hard? When did we forget how to be journalists? When did we forget that? I don't understand why we have to be demonized when asking a question about Sony's censorship policy makes us racist and homophobic. I don't understand where you're drawing the line to get there, to connect those two dots. I don't understand how those two dots are able to be connected. I don't understand it. We don't understand it. Say something. But at the same time, I have to say to Sony as well, you have to say something. We have seen Sony do this silent thing for a long time now. Whenever a controversy comes up, be it the PSN hacking thing back in 2011 or this right now, their ultimate strategy is to not tell their customers anything at all. And we see these same people come and defend them, saying about the Sony hacking thing, oh, well, they don't want to divulge what they're doing because the hackers might be able to get back into the Sony network. Okay, but us normal customers are waiting for something to happen because it was down for such a long time without any explanation about what the hell was going on. You have to communicate with your customer base. And right now, there's a lot of people that are not happy. They are seeing this, they're hearing about this, and as much as they are very angry about the media not saying anything here, they're just as mad, if not more so, about Sony being completely silent. And people are so mad that they actually made a change.org petition to try to get these things reversed. A change.org petition that, for some weird odd reason recently, had 3,000 signatures mysteriously vanish. And some of them that signed it had to re-sign it because no one knew what happened with them. So please explain that one to me as well. Communicate with your audience, communicate with your customer base, and tell them what is going on. Because they have no idea why Sony is becoming what Nintendo was in the late 80s and early 90s. They have absolutely no clue why Sony is deciding to become the morality police. They have no idea, and Sony is absolutely being dead silent. Remember what happened with the PlayStation 3? Sony thought they could be above the game industry and do whatever they want because they thought that people would just flock to the PlayStation 3. Guess what? They might not stay this time around. You might not get a third chance. If you screw this up, they are going to burn you. You know it because they've done it before. They will go to another console, and Nintendo is reaping all the rewards right now. And if you don't stop, it is going to happen again, and they are not going to forgive you this time around. They forgave you for the PlayStation 3 because you saw, hey, we screwed up, and we are going to do our best to make things right. But now you're thinking that now you're on top again, you can do whatever the hell you want. And that is not the way it should go, because the last time you were on top, you thought you could do that was the PlayStation 2. You were on top of the world, and so you thought you could get away with it in the PlayStation 3. You saw what happened there, right, Sony? And the PlayStation Network going down, maybe they forgave you for that. Even though you didn't tell anybody anything. You didn't tell the developers anything, the publishers anything, you didn't tell us anything. And the more you give us complete silence, the more you allow speculation to form as to what the hell is going on. You have to communicate. You have to say something. Have some PR person go out there and say, hey, we understand that there's some concern about our new policy. This is what's going on, A, B, and C. This is what's actually going on. That way we have something to say, hey, we understand your concerns, we want to address them, but don't go completely silent. What is it about Sony that they feel this is the strategy they want to do? And what is it about the media and the Sony vendors saying this is a good thing to do. That is why Sony thinks they could get away with it, because they will not call them out. The media has done that before. They've called out Sony a little bit too much, mind you, but they did call them out on the PlayStation 3 on the mistakes that they made. Why can't they do it now? Why can't we have that same idealism now? But more so, Sony needs to say something, because look what's going on right now. We have Tecmo Koei being the first bigger developer to get hit with this. And the problem with the slippery slope is that if they think they can get away with this, and they have, what's to say that they're thinking, oh, well, they are not worried about us censoring this. Maybe we can censor this from a bigger developer. Maybe Square Enix gets censored. Then maybe Capcom. Then maybe EA or Activision, some of the biggest developers. Or maybe Rockstar. Maybe they would remove your ability to kill women in Red Dead Redemption 2 in that version of the game. Maybe they would force Rockstar to do that. Or The Witcher 3. Maybe CD Projekt Red gets hit big time. Or maybe their own in-house developments. What about Uncharted, Last of Us 2? Maybe those games get censored. That is why you call it out now. That is why you don't let the slippery slope slide anymore. Because you don't want it to get that far. You don't want it to get to a point where you have absolutely no more control over what happens. This is where you need to speak up. Even if you have absolutely no interest in these types of games, and if you are interested in these types of games, then more power to you, because that is your right as an American and as a gamer to consume any type of content you desire, as long as it's not infringing on the rights of someone else. But even if you don't like these types of games, you have to fight for the rights of somebody who would like these types of games for whatever reason it is. And I don't doubt there are people who legitimately like the gameplay aspect of it, the mechanics. Hell, I liked Honey Pot because it was a great mechanic. It was a great twist on the Match 3 game. I didn't have any problem with that. I played that game because I liked the Match 3 concept and because I enjoyed the added mechanic of how to get the female to like a desperate man using the Match 3 concept. You could think of it as an erotic version of Puzzle Quest in a way. It had nothing to do with titillization or whatever you want to call it. It's because it was a good Match 3 game. That was it. There's not to say that there isn't great gameplay concepts to be have in these games or graphic novels or whatever else, that they do not provide a challenging aspect for the player to overcome. But I digress. The fact of the matter is that this is why you deal with it now before they get to the bigger developers, before it becomes out of hand. You have no choice but to address it. This is why you defend those types of games. Not just because they have just as much right to exist as, say, Red Dead Redemption or Uncharted or any other game out there, because they were rated by the ESRB, and so if they say it's fine, as I said, they should be able to exist on whatever platform they choose to put it on. And yes, I've seen far worse in video games than something like this, than anything I've seen that triggered Sony to do stuff like this. But if you don't get it now, who's to say they're not going to go after bigger developers? Don't believe me? If you keep doing this, they will try harder and go further. We have seen them do this before. And again, the PlayStation 3 is a landmark thing to go back to. They thought they could do no wrong there, and they got smacked down hard. But you gave them a second chance, and they are going to screw it up if you don't call this out, if you let them do it. Who's to say they're not going to go after violence next? Which, by the way, they haven't yet. We've seen countless individuals in these games get murdered in very gruesome ways, mind you, and no one's complaining about that from Sony, so apparently that's quite okay, at least for now. And to be quite honest, if people have a really big problem with this sort of thing, they just won't buy it. They will vote with their wallets. It won't be a sell, and people will go on with their lives. But you doing this, you making this sort of decision for him, will only make people more attracted to the product, on another system. Why? Because apparently you forgot what the Streisand effect even is. Because what happens is that now people are going to be more enthused to buy it because they want to know what all the fuss is about. Controversy creates cash. Now people will buy it because what is Sony wanting to keep away from us? You just put a lot more eyeballs to these products now that you're doing this, and you don't seem to get it or don't want to get it. One of the two. Either way, you just did a counterproductive thing and you seem to not give a crap. Either you have completely lost your minds about that whole thing, about what the Streisand effect is, or you have something else in mind here that you're confident that this is the way to go. And yes, I do believe that the latter can be in play because of, again, something I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But you know what? Back to Reset Era for a second, because you know what? I kind of think it's their fault in addition to some other people's fault that this is even happening in the first place. Because if you remember, a few weeks ago, there was a major controversy surrounding the Game & Watch character in Super Smash Bros. In which a 2-frame animation sparked a huge controversy on Reset Era, which was the first people to complain about it, in which they thought it was stereotyping Indian people. Nintendo went back and they changed it. That was not the first thing that Reset Era has pitched a complaint about. So you know what I believe is going on? Sony is now afraid about Reset Era or people within them, within that form, and how cult-like it's becoming. And I had said in a previous video, we should never take what Reset Era says seriously because how cult-like it's becoming, how dangerous it's becoming. However, there should not be a forum that has that much power, that has that much pull within the game industry, within any industry, to make developers be that scared of them that they do these things preemptively. And I believe Sony is trying to preemptively stop Reset Era from going after them. That's what's going on. That's what I feel that's going on. Now, if I am wrong, then please feel free to correct me. But I don't think I am, because the past couple of times that Reset Era has complained, they got exactly what they wanted. CD Projekt Red got doxxed because of them. Nintendo changed 2 frames of animation because of what Reset Era has said. Please don't think for any amount of time that Reset Era might not have that sort of pull to do what it is that I believe they're doing. Twitter deplatformed them for some time after the Tucker Carlson thing, and it was only after they cleaned it up that suddenly Twitter replatformed them. So it is obvious that they are getting a lot of attention. Something in there is not right. And yes, I do believe that the thread about this was pretty balanced in comparison to some of the other threads I've seen about topics like this on Reset Era. But the fact that the moderator came in and took the bait and pretty much was glad to have done so and would like to have seconds from that bait, and the way that they usually act to stuff like this makes me believe that there was something within the moderator team that made them believe that perhaps they couldn't have a legitimate reason to close a thread without resorting to discussing, oh, sexualization of minors is not welcome here, when you know the only people that were bringing it up were the very people who were hoping he would close it because they wanted the conversation shut down because they didn't have any other counterpoint to what the people who were against Sony's censorship policies were saying. And no, Reset Era wasn't the only one that takes moderator bait. The subreddit r/games did it too when they were discussing this very same thing, saying that this isn't where we thought it was going to go and nothing good is going to come of it, so we're just going to lock the thread. That's what the people who don't want you to discuss it want you to do, moderators. They want you to close these threads. They don't want the discussion to happen. That's why they behave the way they do. That's why they go viciously after people. Not only so they can shut them up, but because they know that if they do that, you will bite on that bait. It is within your job to make sure that it doesn't happen, that you don't bite on that bait, because they want you to shut that thread down. They want you to lock that thread up. Unless you have a problem debating that with other people because you don't have an answer to the counterpoints, even though you still feel as though you are in the moral high ground. If you are believing that, then just come out and say, hey, we are for this, we are against that. But at the very least, don't shut down discussion. That's what they want you to do. You're doing the work for them, and you're just making it harder for us legitimate people who legitimately want to talk about these topics from being able to do so. Unless that is your goal all along, to use that as a way to shut people up because you want to be corrected. You don't want to hear any other counterpoints to what you believe has to be the way. And if that's the case, then we have a bigger problem than just Sony's censorship. So TLDR about this whole thing is the media has to be better at calling this out, and they need to call this out. They've done that before with Sony. Why now is this suddenly a taboo thing for them to do? Why is it so hard for people to condemn Sony about anything right now? Why are we being demonized for just asking for answers? Why is labeling somebody a bigot the only answer for anything, even if it has nothing to do with the subject that's being talked about? And why is Sony being so silent to this? Sony needs to say something. You want to know why Ballgate happened in 2001 between the Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars? You know why the whole thing became a firestorm, became a dumpster fire? It is because the referees did not say anything about what happened when they went back to plays and they reviewed a play that had taken place prior to a spiking of the ball by Tim Couch in order to stop the clock, because nothing like that had ever happened before, and the rules dictate that once another play was ran, then the previous play before that could not be reviewed anymore. But because no one said anything, you got people getting irate because they felt as if the Browns were getting screwed out of a playoff berth. And so that was your end result. Now, I'm not condoning what happened there with the throwing of bottles, but you understand why they got irate. Because no one was saying anything. Sony, you have to say something. They're going to get more and more irate. They're going to be more and more angry. And you are going to see them either take out the frustrations verbally on you, or they're just going to go elsewhere. In this case, it's going to be Nintendo this time. They went with Microsoft last time you did something like this because, quite frankly, they saw that it was the better option for the third-party support that they wanted. This time it's going to be Nintendo because Nintendo is saying, hey, as long as it's ESRB rated, we'll take it. And we are going to open up the floodgates, as it were. Now, Nintendo can open up their eyes about their games being on YouTube, then we'll be on a level playing ground. And yes, I do blame Reset Era in part for this, because all that complaining about minute things, about 2-second or even a fraction of a second of an animation that the majority of those people who you thought was going to be offended by it didn't really care. What did you think was going to happen? And what do you think will still happen if you shut down every single discussion that you feel might get overblown, or you take the bait of people who are hoping that you shut down discussion about it? What do you think is going to happen? You're going to get people that will not answer the call when you actually feel threatened by something, because you cried wolf so many times that people are just tired of answering a fake call, and they won't answer the call when there really is a problem that we need to deal with. But what did you think about this? Please leave a comment down below. I know I rambled a lot, but we are trying to leave no stone unturned. No way that anybody can misconstrue the words that I say and take them out of context to make them mean something different. So that's why we do long form videos like this, because if we do, then there's no way no one can take us out of context. So there you go. Leave a comment down below. Please share this video with as many people as you can, because we need to get the word out about what Sony is doing. If the media isn't going to do their job, it is up to us YouTubers, somebody else that we have seen them demonize right now for whatever reason. Thank you, Reset Era, for demonizing us too. But it's up to us to do what the media will not do. No wonder more gamers are trustworthy, more so of us YouTubers, than the traditional gaming media. Because unlike the traditional journalistic media, we actually know how to do our damn jobs right now. My name is JD Shadow, and yes, that just happened.